She sat near the back of the wedding reception hall, tucked just far enough away that she could see everything but not be seen too much herself. The golden lights above shimmered, catching on the crystal glasses and polished silverware, and every table seemed alive with chatter and laughter. Couples leaned into one another, whispering little secrets, while groups of friends clinked glasses in celebration. The bride and groom were radiant, their joy contagious, and the band played a lively tune that made the dance floor pulse with movement. In her elegant gown, a soft shade of emerald silk that hugged her figure and trailed delicately around her wheelchair, she looked every bit as sophisticated as she did in boardrooms, but tonight the power in her presence felt muted. The wheelchair, a part of her life she had long made peace with, seemed heavier in a room filled with graceful dancers and fast-moving joy. She smoothed her dress across her lap, watching quietly as another couple twirled by, the woman's veil fluttering like a ribbon caught in the breeze. A glass of champagne sat before her, the bubbles rising endlessly, but she hadn't touched it. It wasn't that she didn't want to drink, it was that she felt like drinking would mean admitting she was simply passing the time, filling the silence. She was used to being in control, to commanding attention. As the CEO of a billion-dollar company, she was accustomed to respect, admiration, even envy. In that world, people didn't see the chair first, they saw the power in her decisions, the weight of her authority. But here, at a wedding where love and belonging seemed to wrap everyone else in warmth, she felt small, almost invisible. Now and then, someone would pass by with polite smiles and half-hearted invitations to dance. She had declined each one, careful to keep her tone light, her smile reassuring. "I'm fine, thank you," she would say. And she was fine, at least that's what she told herself. But as the night stretched on, a quiet ache pressed against her chest. She wasn't yearning for the dance floor, not exactly. She was yearning for something deeper, for someone to look at her without hesitation, without pity, without calculation. Someone to see her. Her gaze drifted again to the dance floor. A couple, clearly friends of the bride, moved in close harmony, their faces lit with laughter. She caught herself imagining what it would be like to be part of that, to have someone lean in, whisper something silly or tender, to share in the rhythm instead of watching it from afar. The thought made her throat tighten, and she quickly blinked it away. She couldn't afford to let herself spiral into self-pity. That wasn't who she was. She was strong, capable, admired. Still, sitting there alone among a sea of togetherness, the silence of her own corner felt deafening. She shifted slightly in her chair, straightening her back, as though a surge of poise could shield her from the loneliness pressing in. The truth was, beneath all the layers of achievement and resilience, she wanted the same simple thing everyone else seemed to have tonight: connection. Someone to laugh with, someone to stay by her side, not because they felt obligated, but because they wanted to. As the music swelled and another burst of laughter filled the room, she let her eyes wander once more, trying to busy her thoughts. She didn't notice, not yet, that someone across the room had already noticed her. The man had noticed her long before he made his way over. From his table near the children's play area, he had seen her sitting alone, regal in her emerald gown, the kind of woman who seemed untouchable at first glance, yet also heartbreakingly distant. He was no stranger to being an outsider himself. Weddings could be overwhelming, especially when you didn't come with someone at your side. For him, most of his attention was always on his daughter, who was now darting about with a group of children, her laughter ringing like tiny bells. He leaned back in his chair, watching her for another moment. Something about the way she sat, composed, graceful, yet undeniably apart, stirred something in him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. He knew what it was to feel like you didn't belong in a room full of people who seemed to have everything. He was a single dad, still fumbling through life in many ways, always a little too aware of how people sized him up, wondering where the mother was, whether he was capable enough, if he was enough at all. He figured she must know that feeling too, in her own way. Gathering his courage, he stood. His hands smoothed over his shirt nervously as he crossed the polished floor, weaving between laughing groups and clinking glasses until he reached her table. She looked up, surprised, her dark eyes catching his. He leaned down just slightly so his gaze met hers at level, not towering, not hovering, just there. "Hi," he said, his voice carrying an easy warmth that came from years of bedtime stories and gentle reassurances to a little girl. "I'm Daniel." He gestured toward the dance floor where his daughter was now pretending to chase bubbles with another child. That whirlwind over there is my daughter. She's already convinced this wedding is her playground. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, polite but cautious. She nodded, unsure if this was another person trying to fill her solitude with obligatory small talk. Daniel shifted his weight, then grinned, almost boyishly. Look, I know this is a little forward. But, his eyes softened. Would you be my date tonight? The question hung between them, startling in its directness. She blinked, certain she had misheard. Of all the things she expected someone to say tonight, that hadn't been one of them. Her laughter came before she could stop it, soft and incredulous. Your date, she repeated, her voice carrying both curiosity and a trace of disbelief. Yes, he said without hesitation, his tone light but steady. You're here, I'm here, and I figure the night's a lot more fun with company. Besides, my daughter's already found hers. He nodded toward the little girl, who was now hand in hand with a new friend, spinning around in dizzying circles. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. She had spent so long guarding herself, preparing to be overlooked or treated with pity. Yet here he was, not hesitating, not circling around her chair with carefully measured words. He was simply asking. Seeing her, her cheeks warmed as she gave him a measured look. And what exactly does being your date involve? Daniel chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. Mostly eating too much cake, maybe keeping each other company, and possibly saving me from dancing like a fool in front of strangers. His eyes twinkled with mischief. I can't promise I'll be impressive, but I can promise I'll be genuine. Something in his tone, unpolished, unpretentious, and deeply sincere, slipped past the defenses she had built. She exhaled slowly, her smile softening into something real this time. For the first time all evening, she didn't feel like the woman in the wheelchair, or the powerful CEO who had to carry herself with relentless perfection. She felt like a woman being offered a chance to simply be. All right, she murmured, her voice quieter than she intended. I'll be your date. Daniel's grin widened, lighting up his face. He pulled out a chair next to her, settling into it as though he had belonged there all along. And for the first time that night, she wasn't alone. Dinner arrived on silver trays, the clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversation surrounding them. He pulled his chair closer to her table, creating a small, private world just for the two of them, though the hum of the reception still buzzed around them. She lifted her fork with practiced poise, but when she glanced at him, she found him already watching her with an openness that was both disarming and unfamiliar. He broke the silence first. So, he said, cutting into his chicken, what's the secret? You look like someone who knows things, like boardroom secrets, world domination strategies, maybe even the key to why wedding cake tastes better than regular cake. Her laughter burst out before she could stop it. It was light, unguarded, and it startled her as much as it startled him. World domination, maybe, she teased, her eyes narrowing with playfulness. Wedding cake. That's classified. For a moment, she felt like she wasn't carrying her titles, her expectations, or the heavy armor she wore in public. He didn't lead with the questions others always asked, what happened to you? How do you manage? As if her life was a riddle to solve. Instead, he treated her like she was simply there, someone to share jokes and stolen glances with. When he spoke again, his voice grew quieter, a touch more serious. I'm raising my daughter on my own. It's messy most days. Wonderful, but messy. There's peanut butter on the ceiling in our kitchen, and I still don't know how it got there. She smiled, the image warming her. Children are chaos wrapped in joy, she said softly. That's what my sister says about her kids. He nodded, his expression tender. Exactly. They drive you crazy and save you all in the same breath. He paused, then added, but sitting here now, I have to admit, this is the first wedding where I've actually enjoyed myself in years. Usually, I'm just chasing her around, trying to keep her out of the cake before it's served. She tilted her head, studying him. You make it sound effortless, but it can't be. Doing it all on your own. His gaze dropped for a second, then lifted back to hers. It's not easy. But it's worth it. Every day. Her chest tightened, struck by the honesty in his words. She wasn't used to men being this open, this vulnerable without posturing or pretense. She found herself leaning in, forgetting for a moment the walls she'd carefully built. Then, a small tug at Daniel's sleeve broke the moment. His daughter, cheeks flushed from playing, stood beside him. "Daddy, who's your friend?" she asked, peering curiously at the woman in the emerald gown. Daniel's face lit up with pride. "Sweetheart, this is," he looked to her, silently asking permission. She gave a soft smile. "You can call me Claire." The little girl beamed. "Claire, you look like a princess." The word struck her unexpectedly, melting something deep inside. She had been called powerful, brilliant, intimidating, but never something as pure, as simple, as princess. Her throat tightened as she managed, "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the nicest thing anyone has told me all night." The child giggled before running off again, leaving a trail of joy in her wake. Claire and Daniel shared a look, one of quiet understanding, as though something had just shifted between them. For the first time in years, Claire felt as though she was part of something gentle, something real. Not a CEO fighting for respect. Not a woman defined by her chair. Just herself. A woman being seen, listened to, and, dare she admit, cherished. And with every passing second, she found herself wishing the night would never end. The music shifted, softening into something slow and tender. The chatter in the hall dimmed as couples drifted toward the dance floor, their bodies swaying in gentle rhythm under the canopy of golden lights. Claire watched them, her heart tightening. She had convinced herself long ago that slow dances belonged to another world, one she could only observe from the edges. But tonight felt different, because tonight, she wasn't watching entirely alone. Daniel stood, brushing invisible wrinkles from his shirt. He hesitated for only a second before turning to her, extending his hand. His eyes held no hesitation, no pity, only a quiet invitation. "May I?" Her lips parted in surprise. "You want to dance with me?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended, edged with disbelief. "Of course," he said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Though I should warn you, I'm not very good at it. But I was hoping you might let me try anyway." She hesitated, instinctively glancing at her chair. How many times had she imagined this exact moment, only to stop herself with the reminder that she didn't fit the picture. Yet here he was, not asking her to fit into it but reshaping it around her. With a soft exhale, she placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding, steady. Instead of leading her onto the crowded dance floor, Daniel stepped closer to her, right there at the table. He bent slightly, just enough so they were level, and began to sway. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it was theirs. She laughed, the sound bubbling up unbidden. "This isn't exactly ballroom technique." Daniel grinned, swaying a little more dramatically to make her laugh harder. "Good. I'm terrible at ballroom anyway. I'd much rather dance like this, with you." The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and disarming. She let herself lean into the moment, their hands intertwined, his other hand resting lightly over hers. Around them, the world carried on, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, but for her, it all blurred. All she felt was the closeness of him, the sincerity in his eyes. Nearby, his daughter spotted them and clapped her small hands in delight. "Daddy's dancing," she squealed, her joy uncontainable. She skipped over and twirled clumsily beside them, creating a little trio that drew chuckles from a few nearby guests. Instead of embarrassment, Daniel only laughed, scooping his daughter up briefly and spinning her before setting her down gently. The little girl reached for Claire's hand without hesitation, linking the three of them together in a moment that felt impossibly whole. Claire's throat tightened. She had spent years convincing herself that love and family were luxuries she didn't have time for, that her world was built on deals, contracts, and endless responsibilities. Yet here she was, swaying in a circle of joy with a man and his daughter, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel incomplete. She felt chosen. As the song drew to a close, Daniel leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "You know, Claire, I think tonight turned out better than I imagined. I came here just to keep my daughter entertained. I didn't expect to meet someone who," he paused, searching her face, "who makes me forget everyone else in the room." Her chest swelled with a mix of fear and hope. The walls she had built for years felt fragile now, trembling against the warmth of his words. She didn't know where this night would lead, or what tomorrow might bring. But in this moment, under the glow of the lights and the sound of a child's laughter, she let herself believe. For the first time in years, she wasn't sitting on the sidelines. She was part of the dance.